For further analysis on this, we're joined by Mukesh Kapila in Geneva. He's a former UN Humanitarian Coordinator for Sudan and an Emeritus Professor of Global Health and Humanitarian Affairs at the University of Manchester. Mukesh, thank you so much for joining us. So this new report by the IPC Global Initiative, which looks at food security, it says that Umbaru in North Darfur has a global acute malnutrition rate of 52.9%. What exactly does that mean? Can you explain for us?
Well, what that means is that the levels of acute hunger are so high as to basically be more or less famine status. And these regions that you mentioned are on the periphery of the Darfur region. They're right close to the Chad border, and they have been at the epicenter of recent conflicts. So that means that at least several 100,000 children there are going to die, even if food gets in, which it isn't because of the attacks on humanitarian workers and other obstruction to aid. So it's an extremely serious situation, and it turns Darfur and also parts of Kordofan into what we might call the famine capitals of the world.
And the report also shows that these acute malnutrition levels are set to worsen in 2026. I mean, Mukesh, we've been hearing for nearly 3 years from a number of different agencies that Sudan is the worst humanitarian crisis on earth. The World Health Organization has said that, Oxfam, the International Rescue Committee. What is going to change that?
Well, there is no great mystery here, and we don't have to be very clever about it. Basically, the fighting needs to stop, or if it is going to continue, civilians should not be targeted by it, and the fighting groups, especially the RSF, need to allow humanitarians to get through with assistance, especially food and healthcare and water. So in that sense, the answers are very, very straightforward. And whether or not the solutions will be achieved in 2026, I have heard nothing recently to suggest that that is going to be the case. So that being said, I'm not very optimistic about the trends for this year, which are already unfolding.
Why is it, do you think, that Sudan seems to be this crisis which the world forgets?
I don't think the world has forgotten, thanks to people like you who have been putting it on our screen. There is a great concern around the world about what is going on in Sudan. Despite even what's been going on in Gaza, people have been saying that this is the world's biggest humanitarian and human rights crisis. The problem comes from the incapacity, our incapacity, to actually intervene. What are we going to do when geopolitics are paralyzed at the Security Council level, and when regional powers are arming one side or the other, and there is a great deal of fight left in the game with the civilians caught in the middle of it. So that's the problem. And unless we have some kind of a more coercive intervention going on, for which there is no appetite, either regionally or in Africa or in the world, then I'm afraid the suffering is set to continue. So as I was saying, there is actually no great puzzle or mystery about all this. This is deliberate, man-made suffering, which is set to continue, even as we watch and we measure the numbers in ever greater detail and ever greater accuracy as the suffering unfolds.
You mentioned the regional backers that are allowing this to continue to happen. I mean, the report says, and you've said yourself, that immediate actions needed to end the hostilities and open safe corridors for those fleeing conflict. Do you see that happening when there are these regional actors enabling the conflict to continue?
I think the regional actors have been sobered up by what's going on. They've also been condemned by world powers, including the United States, who is friends on both sides of the regional supporters. Now, however, I suspect that the fighting groups, the SAF and more importantly the RSF, they are no longer under control of the regional backers, which means that they have got enough firepower that they can continue the fight even if tomorrow there was some pressure on them and they were told to stop instantly fighting. And the political support for the struggle was withdrawn. So I think this is a bit like thankfully not a thermonuclear reaction, but the equivalent of that, meaning the situation has gone out of control to the point that actually external parties have less and less influence. Now, in those circumstances, you might ask, what is there to do? I can't think of anything other than actually some form of armed intervention. In the old days, we would call it peacekeeping, and we did have African Union and UN peacekeepers when the first genocide took place 20 years ago, when I was head of the UN there. But those days are far gone. And without countervailing military intervention by somebody, I doubt whether the very strong local actors who are wreaking genocidal horrors, especially in Darfur and Kordofan, I don't think they're going to listen to anyone.
Former UN Humanitarian Coordinator for Sudan and Emeritus Professor of Global Health and Humanitarian Affairs at the University of Manchester, Mukesh Kapila, thanks so much. That was a great conversation.